In The Strangers Chapter 2, when the strangers find out one of their victims is still alive, they return to town to finish the job. Hello and welcome to Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of Strangers Chapter 2. Was it good, was it bad, or somewhere right in the middle? Let me know your thoughts on the comparison to Strangers Chapter 1 and the other Strangers movies just as well. And taking it right in the positive, Strangers Chapter 2 goes into a different sort of aura to the film as a whole. There's a lot more action, it picks up the pace, and it's only just above 90 minutes with a lot of filler content of something we're getting out of a great performance from Madeline Petch that really has some scene-stealing moments where she has some great makeup effects, the effects from the blood and gore from everything throughout. It's not too gory for those that are worried about that, but the generality of this film has the basic means that on paper it seems really good, has some decent execution that follows about along the way. The setting is constantly changing, which brings about some great action, whether it's when the hospital, in the woods, in a cabin, and you're including this police detective plot that becomes something of intrigue following about them just as well. And there's a little bit of a background knowledge to the paper on everything we're following about with the strangers that really builds upon some of the groundwork to where we may be moving forward within the future of this franchise, which takes me into the mix element. Unfortunately, there's certain things that may be a hit or miss. Whether you did like the first Stranger Chapter 1, you may be wanting something a little bit more action, and this has something to offer that fulfills just that. And so there is a different type of feel while not feeling too far set apart from what we got in the original. You're following the same character, the same strangers, and you're building upon the groundwork that the first one laid while opening up new areas for emotional grounds that the third chapter could conclude on. But there's also something that could offset what you're ultimately expecting out of it. If you don't like the first one, then this may not offer anything new or fresh that could speak on what these crimes in real life mean for what is happening in this universe. It's not really translating any themes. It's not doing anything daring or fresh, to which with these crimes that are occurring in real life, there is so much open area that the first chapter to this franchise is very derivative of what we got from the first Strangers film in general. So unfortunately, there's something that still may feel empty by the end of the day by what you ultimately get out of this. But at the same time, if you're in there for the kills, if you're in there for the action, this may have something to offer that you may have been looking for before. Which takes me into the negative. While I mentioned on paper that this film does have everything that you could ask for it, unfortunately, it offers very little. That everything that flows by feels very passive. Very little is actually going on. And there's so many different flaws that come up along the way, whether it's this main character that's keep going on, even though she's getting hurt and injured along the way. We have this fatal death within Changers Chapter 1 that shows the consequence of a simple stab wound. And while yes, there's possibility of her survival from that, there's so much more that happens to her within this one that should absolutely not lead her to be surviving all these situations. I kept looking for when a danger came about, when you hear of this dangerous animal attack that's coming her way, it ultimately leads me to question, how are they really going to prevent this from getting to her? And it doesn't prevent it. It leads on to a full-on attack. She has to fight back. And while it leads to the action, it feels like there's so much suspense of disbelief for where you have to lead on with everything. And if you can still enjoy that, despite the disbelief you can enjoy the film for, it just feels very gradual, very slow, and drawn out in all of the wrong areas, just leading you on into something that feels very empty, very shallow, whether it's what you're gaining from the information of what this action is leading on to with this main character, with the background knowledge and the flashbacks that feel very useless because this is only the second movie, and the hole that happens in the door from the first movie, they have to flash back, which offers very little to what we are gaining as audience. And they ultimately lead you into so many things with the music that feels very generic, very dry, that doesn't build on anything. And it exaggerates some of that to where the sound is built up to a higher means than it needs to be, when it ultimately leads on to something that doesn't lend itself to be something as scary as the sound tries to convince you. So there's a lot of emotional manipulation throughout the film that just doesn't latch onto me whatsoever. It doesn't motivate the scenes or do much to what we're ultimately feeling from it, because ultimately there's not a whole lot leading on. While the performances are relatively good enough, the backstory to what we're getting of the strangers, background information, offers very little. It feels very nonchalant with some of the motivation that's leading on to the future, because they can't really risk too much since these are based on real events. Even if this is made up, just the relative aspect to it is just very general, very risque in the way it's falling about what they're doing with the villain backstory, which offers little to the imagination of what you're ultimately getting out of it. And it feels so boring once you're adding in some of those flashbacks. You're wondering where it will end up by the end. And when you get that final flashback, it was deserving enough to fit in the story that it has to offer, but leads on to just a very chill way of offering the advice. It's not adding anything huge or sufficient to what you are ultimately begging for this franchise to offer, because it feels very generic, very forced in a way that it's trying to create a backstory where there didn't need to be one. So, despite a relatively short runtime and something you expect to get out of this franchise, adding in all this action does very little to what you are ultimately being fulfilled by, because of all these different things going on at once, these different subplots, including the police detectives trying to solve the case, and there's short scenes with them that leads to very little, to the ultimate means to an end, that just very little happens throughout the whole film, offering something of a huge disappointment coming about along the way. So that's just my personal thoughts on Strangers Chapter 2, which I have to rate a simply 2.5 out of 10. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of Strangers Chapter 2. Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere right in the middle? How does it compare to the rest of Strangers films, which I'll be having a rank on seeing here on this channel. So make sure to like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you haven't already, to join in film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all, and make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.